You said your daughter just got a flu shot?
Yeah, so they just all things got postponed in the wildness, and so they just did like their well checkups, and so the doctor thinks that our oldest two probably had COVID because it was February, and they got rocked, man, just hard. My wife and I didn't get anything, which is crazy,
That's
but
wild.
they gave the 14-year-old the flu shot. They really were like, you don't want both, and their take on it is that it's going to swing back pretty hard. Numbers are showing that actually. And so they wanted to go ahead and get her the flu shot.
Good
So,
deal.
yeah. She came in and I was like, get away from me. I don't want your germs.
Well, we're just warming up as we kick off at 1:10 here. Hope everyone's joining us and having an okay time getting into the session. Welcome everybody to Breaking Brains and Building Hearts, episode 12.
Yeah, I think 11 or 12. Should I change my username even though we're already live? Because I was doing that to be funny last time.
I haven't put anything in there. I can.
Mine says "C-Mac Daddy make you want to jump."
None of them are in there yet, so there you go, baby. All right.
For the LinkedIn, for the Twitter crowd that I might be connected to, they know I'm weird. Since I'm newer to LinkedIn, maybe it's like, wait, this sounds, as my kids would say, this sounds sus. This sounds suspect, suspicious.
So James Rory's here and Chris McAllister over there. And Breaking Brains, Building Hearts, it's about what's happening in our experience over the last week, but also around us. And the context here is leadership, both for those who have formal leadership roles focused on teams, as well as individuals who just carry that mantle of leadership in positional situations or certain situations that make sense, that require that leadership. We're here to talk about all that. And this idea of breaking brains and building hearts is, just thinking differently and inspiring us to act and behave at a higher level. I think, Chris, you like to say that the ultimate measure of a leader is, do you leave a situation better off than it was when you got there? Am I close?
Yeah, no, I love it. That's great. Everything should be better.
Yeah. And so we're going to kind of free flow today, but the context that we were talking about in advance of going live was this idea of team. And I know team is is a loaded word, Chris, just because I'm thinking that way because when we were talking about it, you went in a different direction. You started talking about community and everything else. So maybe you can kick us off with maybe a thought about team, maybe a broader thought about what that means to you.
Yeah. Well, I think people hear the word team and then they just localize into their work context. And this is how you get the problem where somebody can be like really smooth at work and they're a piece of crap at home, because they know how to turn it on. And I hit that, so not throwing stones at 42. I remember when I was 28 and I was like, people at work that work for me that are much older than me are like, man, you're just so calm and smooth. But what would my family say, especially my wife, because my kids were young at that time, when I'm really under stress? No, I get uptight. I can get rigid. So there's this disconnect. And so we want to think about team in the context of your whole community because, team can be your family. Team can be close relationships. Team can be the work context. And we'll definitely hit on that today. But when you learn who you are and how to show up in all of those, the best version of yourself, then you're constantly improving your community. You're progressing your people. You're impacting the people around you. You're advancing the team. And that's really the end result, which, by the way, being a good teammate, I just want to make sure because, are you recording this on your end, even though we're live? You're still recording?
No.
You don't, so we could record it. We could load it.
No. We'll be hooked up, baby, because we're going to go live and it's going to be up on LinkedIn and other formats. In recorded fashion, and we can download it.
Perfect. Cheers to your brilliance. You've learned all this, so you're awesome.
No brilliance. Well, I'm glad. So I like that. Now, when you started talking, I was connecting with you because, man, my first 15 years of my career, I was that guy right, showed up to work differently than I showed up at home. But I wasn't even the guy that was focused on team. I tend to think of, in a work context, I tend to think of team as a group of folks who are activated to achieve a shared goal. Um, but man, I'll tell you what, when I was a sales guy working at venture-backed startups, the shared goal was not on my mind. It was all about my goal. And so I was a horrible teammate. So I would be smooth and make sure that people felt like I was there, but there was only one thing I cared about, and that was what was important to me. And it took me a while to really, so it was all about the zero-sum game. And it took me a while to see value in the investment in the team. And so now I think about team as a major leverage point for a business, for a community, whatever it might be. But when you can get a bunch of folks focused on the same goal, a shared goal, then you get that 1 + 1 = 3, or that 1 + 1 + 1 = 5 or 7. You get that multiplier effect. So I think of team as an organization, a group of folks that are generating that kind of leverage toward the goal that they share.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and for me, you've got a spectrum, the spectrum that undervalues team and the spectrum that there's a person that's a martyr for the team. So what you're talking about is undervaluing the team. I went through a phase where I was a martyr for the team. Having led 3 organizations through a turnaround, 2 of them in 2 instances, I over-sacrificed for the team to the degree that I was hurting and my family was hurting. Because, I remember, if you lead an organization through a turnaround, there's going to be things like we've got to cut a portion of the workforce, or we've all got to take a
Right.
pay cut, or, all these ways that you do that. And there were times that I took the steepest pay cut because I felt like, I had to make the greatest sacrifice as the leader of the organization.
Yeah.
And there's wisdom in that, and there's a good approach to that, but it can also be damaging in the sense that you become such a martyr, you pay such a price, you're not able to lead the organization and take care of it long term, or you or your family becomes bitter towards the organization because the sacrifice is being made. And so, there's this spectrum that's there, and there is a tension point. There's a sweet spot where what it means to be healthy, so you're not over sacrificing for the team as a martyr, and you're not also underappreciating a team, just, looking at what you can do for yourself. But it's like, no, am I leading in such a way that the people around me are better? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to send this back to you. What is the mindset that got you stuck, and what's the mindset that got you unstuck?
Yeah. The mindset that had me stuck was, you have to, you have to be the one. People have to think you're awesome. You have to be a great leader. You have to solve problems. You have to be the one who's on top of this. You can't stand in front of the organization and admit anything's wrong. You just got to gut it out, solve the problem privately, take care of it. And so what that ends up doing is you suffer in silence. You're limited. You're not coming up with the best creative solutions because there's not a group of people that are engaged in helping you. Instead, it's just you.
Right.
And so mindset, is it's scarcity thinking on either extreme. For your extreme, the scarcity thinking of, the team's just going to slow me down, right? They're going to get in my way. I can outrun them. It's going to take too much time, effort, and energy. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I don't want to
good?
share. I don't want to share the reward. I don't want to share the credit. I don't want to make people feel like I need help. I want to show them I can do it on my own. I don't need them.
Yes. And it's the scarcity mindset, there's this limited pie and I'd rather get all that pie for me.
Right.
But on the other end, it's a scarcity mindset also because it's like, they're going to look at me and they're going to perceive me to be bad as a leader. And so I have to be this lone ranger, not just because I want all the pie,
Right.
The scarcity mindset, I've got to be this lone ranger because I got to have all the shit figured out. Like, I'm the leader. I should have the answers. I should know what to do, rather than understanding an abundant mindset, which is this middle tension of, you know what? It's not my job to have all the answers. My job is to get the people together that have the answers and get those answers out and get them working on it and help them focus on it and help them get to the best answer.
Right.
And so for me to be willing to be the martyr and to pay that price, it's a good thing starting out, but it becomes a negative thing when there's a diminishing return on your perseverance and you overpay that price, right? And that's where you see, tons of smaller stage, small businesses, early stage businesses or small businesses, early stage startups or small businesses. There's usually some martyrdom at work where there's a scarcity mindset. They think they got to have all the answers and figure it all out. And yeah, painful. I still got scars, trauma from it embodied in me.
Heavy topic. That's pretty wild. I can also imagine, I mean, working with small business owners myself, I know you do as well. I was thinking about, just this idea of how can I ask them to suffer? I should be the one suffering. So it's this idea that we're unwilling to either hold people accountable for the work they're not doing or admit that the business model is flawed, or make those tough decisions. It's easier to just sacrifice as the martyr than to make those tough decisions or investigate really what is it going to take to sustain the business in a way that is going to make sense for everyone. And sometimes that, there's business owners that keep folks on staff and don't take a salary because they're maybe they just don't want to face the idea of letting somebody go.
Yeah.
That in of itself is a huge maybe knock against their credibility as a leader.
Well, I've seen it done right where the leader can forego pay to keep everyone. I've seen it done in a number of scenarios. For most companies, though, there's enough bloat there that a crisis provides an opportunity to get honest. And as you would say, trim the fat without trimming the muscle. I have seen some organizations, though, that were operating really lean and healthy, and a crisis hit, and then the main leader or owner, everybody takes a pay cut, and then they go without pay for a while.
Right.
And I think that can be powerful. Usually that person has the means on the front end of that to endure it, or on the back end there's enough reward, and there needs to be reward. I mean, they're keeping a lot of people in jobs. But if there were easy, like black and white answers, take this step and do this, then it wouldn't, nothing in life is like that worth having. At least anything I've found. When it is easy, though, it is a nice little reprieve. You're like, that was easy. That was cool. I don't mind a few of those things, but I don't expect them.
Right. And the hardest thing is to laugh about it, right? When it's not easy.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, this idea. When we talked about team, you brought in the word community. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, just again, to break brains a little bit and make us think differently, what does a team and a community have in common? How do we bring them together in our thinking?
Yeah. Well, when I think about a leader at their healthiest, best self, when they know who they are as a leader and they're not pursuing their role they fulfill, the leader of the team or the company or the community they're in, the family relationships, when they know who they are and they fulfill the role, he or she, in a way that their best self is showing up, then it's impossible for it not to happen. What's going to be the overflow of them knowing who they are and fulfilling their role? Healthy community results from that. So people want to engineer healthy community. They want to have a healthy team. The number of times I see online where somebody goes, it's a healthy we, it's we before me, is what they say all the time in teamwork. Well, the problem with that is it's such a backward approach. I know why they're saying it, They're saying it because there was somebody selfish and narcissistic and demanding and childish and wanting the resources and wanting the attention and wanting things to be built around them, that they're trying to help the environment shift another direction. And they're saying, hey, suppress the individual desire that you have, suppress what you're trying to hold this team hostage with, so that we can elevate what we all need.
Right.
Well, that's just an equally blind overreaction. It would be like if one of my children were hurting and we're about to go into dinner time and bond and connect, and I go, hey, just stuff that down.
Just
Quit
suck it
whining
up.
about your problem. Suck it up. We're about to go have a we experience.
Right.
Your meanness
Don't bring us.
doesn't matter. Yeah, yeah. And what's transforming though is when, and the number of times this happens in a family, and it'll happen in a team environment if you catch it, that we say to the child, your need is important. We have to consider your need and the whole of the family. But your need is still important. It's a both and thing. If you've got a teammate that's acting childish and you're trying to get past that by saying it's we before me, you're probably missing some innovation that could come out of what they're upset by. You're probably missing some kind of system change, right? Or you're missing a way to deepen the relationship. There's a cue or a signal and they're hurt, or you haven't communicated the vision.
Right.
And there's a misalignment there. So they're giving you a gift by letting you know where they're bothered. You're going to help grow them up in the vision. You're going to help deepen the relationship, or you're going to find an innovation. And none of those can happen when you don't appreciate that a healthy me, a bunch of healthy me's,
Right.
make up the healthy we. It's a flow through.
Right. Yeah. So it's always about. So I like the saying, and I said this originally just because I wanted to be a little bit different than everybody else. But the old saying, "There's no I in team." I used to say that, but there is a me, right? And so what I recognized early, especially in sports.
That's awesome.
Thank you, my man. Especially in sports, you cannot have a successful team if the individuals on that team don't feel fulfilled, right? To me, that's what, a communist or a fascist state, right? When everybody hears this idea of we before me, they go right to, especially today, they go right to communism or something crazy, right to the extreme. But to me, that a healthy team isn't just about the team and the team's goal. So like you said, at the sacrifice or with the sacrifice of the individuals, it's the team's goal along with all the objectives of the individuals. You have to be on purpose to be a healthy member of that team. So the leader has to consider all the individual goals as well as the team goals. And it seems to me the way that works best is if the leader is able to weave together or identify all the individual goals that are consistent with or in support of or connected to the overall team goals. And if there's somebody in that team whose goals are not aligned, that person probably would be better served doing something else or being part of another initiative. But if everyone on that team is on purpose while they are executing their role, while they're helping the we succeed, that seems like it's aligned with what you're talking about.
Yes. But I would say, have you heard the distinction between the strong link player sports and the weak link player sports?
Sure.
Yeah. So that comes to mind. It's like, we want everybody connected, moving together on purpose in the same direction. But it's also just acknowledging that there are different levels of players. And I think more often than not all business context, but more often than not, a business context is a strong link sport. It's more defined by the strength of the top end of the aptitude of the best player than it is by the skill level of the bottom player, like in soccer or something. It's more like basketball. Would you agree with that? Just curious what your take on that would be.
It's an awesome observation. I think one of the things that, because we do a lot of recruiting for our clients as well, we're always looking at this concept, and I should put a plug in for our Growth Multiplier Index. That tool that we offer through growthmultiplier.com, is a tool that's designed to help leaders understand the mindset alignment of their team members with the role that each team member plays, presuming that each of those roles is ideally designed to achieve the team's objectives. And then what we help them do is think about when the mindset isn't aligned, how to reorganize the team. So before we hire, we actually think about just what you're talking about, this idea of reallocating resources and then looking at what's left in terms of gaps and then filling those gaps. But in a business context, there is a balance, right? Just like in a football team, there's always more players than they need to play anyone down because we need backups, right? So the team does officially cultivate a range of capabilities on that team based on the role that each of those individuals play. Because you can think about, for example, a sales team. Wouldn't you want every member of your sales team to be a top producer? Absolutely, and that's always the goal. The highest producing sales teams have about 75% of their members operating at a top performer level. And so if you think about that compared to all the sales teams out there,
That's fascinating.
you're going to accept a certain number of poor performers. One, you think that they have the mindset that's going to allow them to build their mastery and elevate their capabilities. So they're a work in progress. So instead of being an A player, they're a B player. For me, a B player is a C player who's on their way up. A C player is a B player who's on their way down. They're heading in different directions. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's generally how I think about the team dynamic. There's some science there, but there's also art in terms of how you accept of and structure the strong and weak players.
So would you say, like, I could take a sales team and with the right people and have 75% of them be top performers?
Right. I mean, first off, you have to think about what's the definition of a top performer. So
Yes.
usually, you can say compared to the industry or compared to the goal I've set for them, because I can raise the goal and all of a sudden half of my team now are top performers because now only potentially the best of the 75 can hit the goal. Now everybody else is working their way up. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but it's when consultants and researchers throw out research and statistics that makes all this stuff black and white, it confounds a lot of people. The most thoughtful leaders, I think, are confounded because they know that the black and white isn't true. And the folks that are just hearing it for the first time maybe make decisions that they wouldn't if they had a deeper understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's a sophisticated challenge. And I think what we're figuring out here is that the best leaders probably are folks that have failed in the past, probably are folks that have made those big mistakes and rebounded so they can kind of get a sense of where the balance between science and art is as they're thinking about putting together and developing and cultivating those kinds of ideal teams.
Well, and I think if they're growth oriented, like I know we aim to be and help people be growth multipliers, they're going to seek out team opportunities, taking the team somewhere or taking on a new team that expands them. I mean, this is why for me, I love this idea. You don't lose yourself in long-term commitments. You actually find more of yourself. I mean, people think, you got a marriage that's 20, 30, 40 years and, the dad who's been a dad for 20 years and he gets stuck in those ruts. But actually for me, even though I have my own ways of enjoying my ruts and having fun with it, nothing grows me as much as leading a team at the edge. So if that's a team in work and in a company and in an organization, am I at my edge? Are they at their edge? Let's freaking go. because I won't be able to just depend on the skills that I've built up to this point. I mean, you could study Ken Blanchard's situational leadership. We've talked about this before: the forming, storming, norming, performing.
Right.
What phase is the team in? What do they need right now? Because whatever they need right now is going to grow me to have to give that to them. And my family could have been in a storming phase recently with just, I think, all the fatigue from the craziness of the world in 2020.
Right.
And now as that storming, where, I just really feel that that's what's happening. As much as I can get ahead just of the next moment and look for ways to unearth a norming moment, right? Where to use Ken Blanchard's model, I'm giving high comfort and low direction.
Right.
And I'm on the lookout for those. And so what makes it exciting to me is, that's the real pleasure and joy of leading a team. First and foremost is the depth of the relationships. I've asked this question to so many people. How's life? If circumstances are bad but relationships are good, most people say life is good. If circumstances are good but relationships are bad, most people say life is bad. So I do think that there's that desire that we have, but there is a mechanism that happens when you're leading a team at the edge that keeps your growth going. Even if you do get a little curmudgeon-y and, I want to eat my dinner and chill out, watch some TV. I eat my favorite cashew ice cream with chocolate syrup and peanut butter. And I sit on the couch and my kids are like, Dad, again? Gross, just buy chocolate peanut butter ice cream. I'm like, this is how I want to have it. The world is okay when I have this like this, But what they don't know is they see a routine. I'm at the edge of my abilities with them and growing like crazy. Those little routines are just manifestations of seeking comfort,
I love it, man. So it comes back to your definition of success in a team, right? Your idea of living at the edge of our abilities, right? Is our team doing that? And are we doing that while we're accomplishing our objectives and our goals? Especially in the context of a business. That's wonderful because there are a lot of high performers who have a fixed mindset, right? They're folks that are not living at the edge of their abilities and they're not looking to stretch themselves. So that level of complacency, while they may be able to produce at a certain level, they can also challenge the culture. If everyone else is stretching, everyone else is learning, everyone else is asking questions, and they're not, the leader has a decision to make. Do I sacrifice the impact on my culture for the short-term reward of their performance, or do I sacrifice their performance to really strengthen and embolden the culture that I've built? I think we know what Peter Drucker would say, right? What would you say?
I really do believe this. A healthy community moves at the pace of the greatest need. So, did you see that Guinness commercial with the people that were playing basketball in wheelchairs by chance?
I did. It was only a short time though, right? It was.
Yeah. So it does one shot like up at the backboard, so you think they're just playing basketball. Shot 2 is a bunch of guys in wheelchairs. Shot 3, all of them get up except one.
Right. Right.
Freaking awesome, right? What was the point of the commercial? We're playing in wheelchairs to meet our friend where he is. We're willingly enduring a limitation for connection. So this is the tension point. What's the greatest need of the organization or the team or the family? Now, in our family, we're not going to fire anybody. If one of my children doesn't perform, we're going to pay attention and we're going to say, you're loved all the time, but we're going to address performance intentionally and separate these two and move at the pace of the greatest need. Now, in a work situation, the principle is still there, but you know what? Sometimes the greatest need is that person is toxic to this team. That person sets a standard of performance that isn't acceptable. That person isn't on vision. We've tried. So they're not going to be on the team anymore. The greatest need that we have is an aligned, focused team. We're all punished if we're dragging some dead weight. But maybe the greatest need is for the team, we need to model some empathy and compassion and kindness and give this person some time. They're facing a really challenging situation. We've got to give people chances to get aligned on the vision, to get healthier in the way that they engage in relationships, or to embrace a new initiative that they're
Right.
having trouble with. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a coldness that's not expressed in some of management philosophy that got us here, in the stage of life that we're in work-wise in the world right now. And I don't think it's appealing to kind and compassionate leaders. I definitely don't think it's appealing to leaders under 30. And so then you have this, well, they need to grow up and they need to get tougher, and this is the way it is. And I'm like, no, there's a new way forward. Let's not be afraid of the mess of this. Let's step into it. Yes, we're going to manage for performance. That's intentional and strategic and has to happen. But we're also going to care for personhood. And, most leaders right now that could be watching this, if they're wondering if they should fire somebody, it's too late. They should have already done it. By the time you're wondering about it, it should have already been done.
Right.
So I could sound like a hard ass in the way that I talk about hiring and firing. And then I could sound like a complete softy about moving at the pace of the greatest need. But that's what grows you as a leader. You're in the tension of this. There's not black and white answers. There's a lot of gray here. And you develop principles that help you as a specific leader move through this faster. But yeah, I mean, you tell me, Jimmy, when have you ever had a situation work out well where you were too lenient, right? We've been burned by those.
It never happens. It only happens in your mind, right? It only works out well because you justify it. Well, I was a nice guy. Well, I stayed true to my core values. This person took advantage of me. Well, that's just the kind of person I am. When I hear you talk about, this idea of meeting that person who needs help at where they are, well, you're only doing that because they're on the team, right?
Exactly.
If they don't deserve to be on the team, then let's be honest about that, and then we don't have to worry about this idea of meeting them where they are. So the meeting with them where they are only is an issue because they're a valued member of the team. And so for me, especially in a world where, like the sales world or the growth world that we live in, growth cannot be a feeling. It can't just be a feeling. It has to at some point, because the world we live in has, a monetary component and an objective, quantifiable component to it. The decisions we make have to be based on objective, quantifiable data. So it's not just about the feeling we have. We have to have people on the team who belong there. One of the ways that I justify this is simply saying, look, you're hired to play a role. And if you were my daughter and you were hired to play a role and weren't performing in the role, I would let you go. I'd find another role for you for which you were qualified. It's the most compassionate thing to do. You want people doing something they're meant to do so they can enjoy their life and they can pursue a level of mastery that they wouldn't be able to working at something that they were unqualified for.
Because they're going to resent you later. I mean,
No.
you have at least a chance that they're going to appreciate you later.
Exactly.
For being honest with them. And I've seen it happen, but they're going to resent you.
Right.
If you enable them. Well, I'm curious what your take on this would be, because I totally agree on the data. So for me, the data is something like, if you come to a meeting twice, and I use agendas for accountability, and so you were going to do this by this date.
Right.
That's the commitment. So the agenda holds you accountable. I don't have to. But if you miss 2 commitments, you've committed to have something done by a date, and you miss 2 in a row without any communication.
Right.
Right. And we're not talking about, the people that are weaselly. I think everybody needs to at least once in their lives manage somebody who's weaselly, who can like just slippery, just out of everything, you know? There's always something, but you're
Who
never
never had an
them,
intention of keeping their commitment. Yeah, and
you know?
just yeah.
Yeah, so we know those people. But I'm talking about, you know, two people that like or two times in a row, they've missed something, they haven't communicated, you know. You've said by doing that, I don't want to be on the team anymore. I don't want to be on the team anymore, you know. Your actions, you know, have communicated that. And so I think there is or whatever your obligation that you've committed to fulfill. Don't commit to fulfill something unless it's the overflow and truth of who you are. If not, you know,
Yeah.
you're not going to want to do it. But if you have done that, so the data points, I think that's a really clear thing. But I'm curious what you think about this. I think before the data is there, you can pay attention to the feeling. That's what you really want to start to pay attention to, hone your intuition. And if you can get your head and heart free of the shoulds and should nots, your own insecurities and your own junk, that's the sweet spot where you learn to pay attention to things before, where there's smoke before there's a fire. You just get that feeling and you're like, I wonder how they're doing. You
Right.
know?
You pay
The
attention
last,
to the feeling. Right.
bam, exactly. That's where you want to start paying attention to the intuition, because then you can put a lot of energy in that before it becomes a data issue. But once it's a data issue, yeah.
I think that's fair. I think it's interesting to think about that. I think I and maybe the people listening would want to dive deeper into that. The one thing I would say to you that, and it's a very subtle thing, and I'm not suggesting you didn't mean this, but I think it's
Please,
worth
yeah.
I think it's worth raising. You know, your example of, you know, if you miss two commitments without communication, that's a problem. One of the things that's interesting to me is a lot of leaders lead with common sense, what they consider to be common sense, and it is not common sense. It's
Mm.
not common, and so for me, the recommendation I always have is if you're going to hold someone accountable to something, you have to make sure that that was communicated ahead of time. So the expectation is, look, you miss a commitment twice without letting me know, or without any forewarning, that's going to be a problem. That has to be part of the culture, and it has to be something that's lived on a consistent, regular basis. Because the minute we say it and don't do it, it becomes unimportant. And if we
Mhm.
continue to do that, then we have a major problem. So for me, leadership and having the right to hold folks accountable comes with the responsibility of making sure that everybody knows what you're going to be holding them accountable to. My big definition here is that you can only hold people accountable to what they can control, or accountable for what they can control. And the only way they can control meeting your expectations is if they know what your expectations are. So we have to be exquisitely frank and clear about that.
Ooh, I like that. Exquisitely frank. Here's how I do that. I have an agenda. It
Right?
inform, discuss, act. It's democratic in the sense that anybody can see it before the meeting. It's not open. I may take some things off or add some things, but
It's not open to
you
debate.
know,
It's your agenda.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but you know what we're going to be informed of, you know what we're going to discuss, and you know what we're going to act on, and you know with dates what were the last assigned agreed to actions. So that all happened communally. We all agreed to it last meeting. So,
Right.
you know, and it's powerful when you do that, because, and I do take for granted that I know that doesn't happen in so many settings, but it's powerful because there's so much sideways energy that just gets, you know, you need to be able to lead an organization even with complex variables in a 30-minute meeting per week, like super tight. You can let it go to an hour,
Right.
right?
Right.
If you lead it well, it doesn't need more time than that.
Right. What I'd love to just point out here is, and you don't have to be a dictator in that meeting. You know,
Oh
this
no.
I love the movement around servant leadership, but it's largely misunderstood, right? This idea of servant leader, I'm going to serve shared goals and lead you down a shared path to change. That's how I interpret the phrase. But it's a phrase that's meant to challenge the power leader who is dictatorial. And what's really interesting is if we're operating the way that you suggest, right? I'm going to come in and lead. This is my path. My agenda is part of the path that we're going to walk to change and to the success that we seek. I don't have to dictate or impose the agenda. I can offer the agenda, and I can then ask folks if they commit to it or not, right?
And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I can ask them if they commit. The challenge here that most people can't step up to is holding folks accountable to their commitments. We'd much rather be the dictator and tell folks, but that destroys relationships, it destroys trust, and it actually hurts our effectiveness as a leader, because our employees and the people around us are volunteers. Even if they are forced to live in our house, they're volunteering, our kids, to listen to us or not. They're volunteering to wear the helmet or not when they ride their bike. Our employees are the same way. They're volunteering to actually give us their best effort or not. So instead of being a dictator, simply be someone who is, as you said, more democratic. Ask them for their commitment. When they when they push back, listen, have the dialogue. It doesn't you don't have to consider yourself a dictator to say the path isn't going to change. I appreciate the insight. I'd like to roll this way for now. Let's see how it goes. Do I have your commitment? And now hold them accountable to it. When someone takes a job and commits to a role, hold them accountable to it. Now, if you change the role, this happens 100% of the time, or as close to 100% of the time as you can get in this world. You hire someone for a role, and you recognize how smart they are, and then you start changing the role. Can you do this thing? Can you do this? And you start adding on top. Now all of a sudden, you are breaking your commitment to them.
Yeah,
expecting them to be amazing, right? So it's a two-way street.
I love the question. Do you commit to this, and the whole approach of that? But I would say this though. I don't think most leaders drift towards dictatorial. This is very stereotypical, very. So there's exceptions to this. But my experience has been leaders over 45 tend to be dictatorial. Leaders under that tend to be too lackadaisical. They don't show enough strength.
Right.
And so that's why when I think about the leader that I want to work for, if I'm working for a leader, I want them to know the stage of the team and lead the team at that stage. So if we're in stage 1 forming, bring direction, help us move so we learn how to be aligned with the vision and the values. If we're in stage 2 storming, turn up the empath, start being more comforting. We're going to circle around on some of this pain if we don't, right? But then as we get to stage 3 and 4, you are holding the agenda looser, And there's so many different now technological systems you can use to have one that's democratic, that you can still control and influence, and blah, blah, blah. But I think for me, the number of organizations that don't have a weekly meeting, or they don't know how to run it well, and I don't want to get into entrepreneurial operating systems, the reason businesses even exist to help business with their operating systems is because it's such a mess. But we do overcomplicate it. It's like,
right.
What you can get done in a 30-minute meeting is insane. If you know who you are as a leader, you lead appropriately for the stage that it's in, and you get people, like you're saying, committed to something that's true to who they are and work that they will work on, let's freaking go. No mediocre teams there.
Yeah. It comes down to leadership. I love 15-minute meetings, one-on-one, 15-minute daily huddles. Great way to make sure you stay connected with your group. Great way to keep them on task.
I had to do that for a while. I had an organization. We were leading through a turnaround. We did daily meetings, stand up in the conference room, 5 minutes. Yeah. Everybody had to tell me what they're working on.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lead that way forever. It was the phase we were in.
Right. So I love this. So we're coming up to the end of the session. What I want to make sure, though, we mentioned a lot of concepts here that folks might be interested in. Forming, storming, norming,
performing.
And anything like that you heard today, reach out to us at grow@growthmultiplier.com. We'll let us know what you want more insight into, any book that we mentioned, any concept we mentioned. A lot of this stuff comes from stuff that we've written as well as stuff that we've read. Happy to help you out. You have been listening to Breaking Brains and Building Hearts with me, James Rorys, and my partner, Chris McAllister, the one and only.
See Mac Daddy make you want to jump.
And by the way, Chris, let's just talk about your podcast. And I want folks to hear about it because it's going to blow your mind and you got to check it out at least once.
Dude, yeah, at least once and then run the other way. That's generous. Well, new podcast. It's only going to be 40 episodes, polycontemplative.com. And if you've ever found yourself pushing against the box of your spirituality and you don't want a conversation that's full of woo, but like if a philosopher, psychologist, religious professor, and monk were in a bar talking about a topic, how would they talk about it? Because that's the weird combo happening in here, as you know, and you're still here and my friend. So thank you. So we're loading those at about one a week, and we'll see what happens with it. Having some fun.
Expect the unexpected and talk about breaking brains, man. It's good stuff. Thank you for joining us, folks. We'll be here again next week. Until then, all the best.
Peace.